So as far as the future is concerned, I mean, we will talk players. We'll talk players who will be moved on. We'll talk players who will come in. We'll talk about Ten Hag as well. But there's going to be an uncertainty in this discussion, isn't there, Laurie? Because there's uncertainty within the club, and then until they sort stuff out ownership wise and boardroom wise, the whole thing is just in the mire.
Yeah, there's lots of questions regarding that. And I mean, what they say internally and what they're projecting to agents and players is that it's business as usual. So they are progressing with the mindset of, the fact that they overspent last summer and they're having to be very tight with their budget this summer. Obviously, they could only do loans in January. So that's what they're progressing with. And that's the kind of basis of having conversations with targets and trying to assess the landscape. But yeah, at the base of it, you then got, well, okay, what happens if then Sir Jim Ratcliffe takes over the club, or indeed Sheikh Jassim and the Qatari bid, although that's looking less likely, just given everything that you hear. Does that change the dynamic greatly? I don't know. I think it seems like, Avram was there again, wasn't he? His third trip to Wembley this year for this expensive private jet flight, £250,000 a trip, and he didn't answer any questions as he came through the mix zone afterwards. He wouldn't do, I suppose. But I do think there needs to be clarity. There's a suggestion that there will be some clarity this week on that front. But then, you sort of check it out with people and they say, well, we heard this, 2 months ago, the same kind of thing. So there's cloak and dagger, there's claim and counterclaim, but there's certainly people that have that work with Sir Jim Ratcliffe that feel like they're putting the moves in place to ultimately take control of the club, but until you get anything confirmed, even they don't know for sure. So it's this kind of guessing game a little bit, and in the midst of all that, as you say, they've got sales that they need to make, they've got signings that they need to make. Can they really push through on those things when there's this uncertainty over who actually signs the checks or gives the ultimate thumbs up? We're led to believe that at the moment, as it stands, if United want to make a signing, I know Avram was there, but it's Joel Glazer that's the kind of ultimate arbiter on that, and it hasn't yet reached the stage where bidders would be included in conversations about who they might be going for.
But budget-wise, is this at the moment with no takeover? Is this more the budget they have? Is it more to do with financial fair play than it is how much money the Glazers will give Ten Hag?
Yeah, I think so, because in the last financial results, they said that they would pay off £200 million. It's a little bit more than that because of the interest, but of the revolving credit facility, the company credit card, as I call it, which was what they used to make signings last summer. So if they pay that off because they've got revenues in, then theoretically they could spend, it's 300 million is the maximum they can spend on this revolving credit facility. So if they really wanted to, they could push the boat out, and obviously they could pay in installments or whatever. But I think it's the financial fair play, profit and sustainability rules that are limiting what they can spend this summer. And we've previously reported 100 million plus sales, but then you also speak to people that say, well, they kind of need to sell first. It's difficult to work out without seeing the full accounts exactly what United can do based on the rules. But there's certainly that's a conscious sort of factor in many people's minds at the club.
And therefore, and this doesn't make it very sexy, Mark, because people want to know, are they going to sign this player? Are they going to sign that player? But actually, it means when you look at the list of players that they're being linked with, even if they buy 2 of them, I can't see how they can afford anybody else.
No, that is almost a symptom of the position that they were in this time last year. I think that's what you've got to go into this window conscious of, is that United spent upwards of £200 million outlay last year on transfers to get on with this rebuild that everybody said needed to be done. But that was, speaking to people at the time, that was much more than they ever expected to spend going into that window. They knew there would be a knock-on effect for windows after that. But it still wasn't enough to meet the scale of the task that needed to be done. And so you can look at the names now. Obviously, we've been reporting about Mason Mount. Laurie's mentioned Rasmus Holmond and Colin Moani as well. These names are out there. It's going to be difficult to address those positions that need to be addressed, but address the other positions that need to be done as well. On top of that, if we're looking at a midfielder and a striker, we still haven't addressed the biggest elephant in the room, and the biggest elephant in the room on Saturday, which was the goalkeeping situation in David De Gea. So it's, again, like I say, a knock-on effect of this bigger, deeper, the breadth of the rebuild that needed to be done this time last year. I think we were all conscious of it then, that this club was nowhere near. I mean, people didn't really expect them to finish top four, did they? They have. No. And so they're in a strange position at the end of this season where it's a good season, it's full of progress, but there's so much work that needs to be done. And that's really, it's quite rare for a club of United's size and stature to end up in that, because you often think it's just, you look at City and Liverpool over the last few years, it's only ever really been a few additions here and there. With United, the scale of the task is much greater, and the funds mean that it's going to be stretched over a number of years.
Which is why a lot of United fans, I think, will probably understand the move for Mason Mount. And they do probably need midfield reinforcements, but a midfielder might be third or fourth on the main list of priorities, wouldn't it, Laurie? Oh, well, either of you.
Yeah, no, sorry. I think, look, I think there was a bit of surprise when Mount was the first name that's really been solidly, incredibly linked. It's part of the package, like I say, of this much bigger, deeper rebuild that needs to happen. It's probably an element of it is that it's probably a slightly easier deal to do than some of the other names that have been banded, certainly some of the top priority names, if you think of Kane, for example. So that's maybe why it's come out first. Again, but take your pick. You know, we're looking at a squad here that has several different holes, and different people might prioritize different ones. I still think the chase for Frankie de Jong last summer was so protracted and so high profile and ultimately unsuccessful that Ten Hag's still going to be looking for a midfielder who he feels is able to take the ball under pressure, take the ball off the back four, carry it up the field. That's what he was looking for. Whether that's Mason Mount or not is a different question, but it's not that much of a surprise that he's still looking in that area, for me at least.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, when we came out of January, the two positions actually were, clearly centre forward. That is absolutely, just beyond anything you could. It's beyond scale in terms of how important that is really for United in the summer, and even to the point where Ten Hag ideally, I think, would like an experienced striker and a younger striker, so that they've got that kind of dynamic where you've got one that perhaps for future years would be a great asset for 5-6 years, but that isn't immediately under pressure to perform. So like a Højlund, so Atalanta is 20, so that they would probably be a gamble if they went for that. But as Critch has touched on, it's a deal that is there to be done if the price is right. Atalanta do sell their players. That's something that he's looked at. The player himself, I mean, then Harry Kane is the one that Ten Hag sees as the ideal centre forward candidate. How could he not be? 30 goals this season for Spurs in a bad Spurs team. He's done it season after season. He's still actually playing a number of games. I think it's like 45 games on average he's played in the last 9 years, which is, so it's a good, for all the kind of idea that he's getting on and he's somehow got injury problems. I don't really think that stands the test in the statistics. But then again, does Daniel Levy want to sell to a Premier League rival? The idea is absolutely not. So do United really want to go and push that like they did with the Frankie de Jong situation and have a long drawn out summer? Is a free transfer more likely next summer? So yeah, they're the kind of questions. But I do think midfield, as Critch has touched on, is something that United do need to enhance, just because, I mean, they signed Eriksen and Casemiro last summer, who obviously, raised the level that United were able to get to in terms of control. Eriksen, I think, has drifted probably in recent weeks, certainly physically. He's 31, Casemiro's 31. So you've got these two guys there over the age of 30 that, are you starting central midfielders? I mean, Mason Mount's 24. He's won the Champions League already. He's been Chelsea's player of the season twice. I can see that some people are looking at that thinking it's not really a signing that excites me. But I think actually maybe that's what United have lacked in previous years, where you've had these kind of star names and let's go for the shiny thing. Well, actually, this is a potential player. If Ten Hag thinks that, and I think he first saw him play for Vitesse Arnhem against Ajax, and Vitesse won. If Ten Hag thinks that, then you kind of you have to, I think, understand that he's seeing how the team would function totally in his mind.
How many do they want out? How many could they actually get money for?
There's a few I think that they could get money for. I mean, Dean Henderson's probably the most obvious one, just because he's been on loan at Nottingham Forest. He wants to be a number one somewhere. So
he's not in the United goalkeeper conversation then anymore.
He could be, but I think it's already got to a point where Ten Hag ideally would, like a goalkeeper that is brilliant with his feet. And he gave that first hint, didn't he, after the City game? He's been asked about De Gea so many times. Is he going to be a number one goalkeeper? Is he going to sign a new contract? And he's always said, no, we want him to stay. We trust in him. He's got the most clean sheets this season. This was the first time where he was asked about De Gea's kicking particularly. And he said, look, there's issues in games that we want to build on that aren't quite right. And that was the first kind of indication that, he ultimately does want to have a better goalkeeper in that department. And Henderson, for all his character and shot stopping, I don't know if he's actually that much more comfortable on the ball than De Gea. And Nottingham Forest are right there to say, for example, I think there's another club as well that has expressed an interest, maybe Tottenham, given Hugo Lloris's departing this summer. But that you could get 25-30 million for him. I generally think that, and that would then, if you could funnel that into, say, Mount, that would be maybe, half, or I don't know, 4/5 of what Mason Mount might cost you. I don't know how that would shake down, but so I think that's one. Scott McTominay is another one where Newcastle have expressed an interest. Fred, we saw Marco Silva have a conversation with him after the game, where Fulham visited Old Trafford, and he's 29, 30, I think he might be 30 now actually, Fred. He's got 1 year left as well, so he maybe is the more obvious candidate to be sold. He won't get as much money maybe as McTominay, but you've got more years with McTominay at the club. So Harry Maguire, that's the other big question. We sort of mentioned him in a piece this morning on The Athletic about transfers to watch. The indications that I get are that he wants to stay, and that it would probably be a difficult deal to do if United did want to sell him. But how satisfied will he be sitting on the bench if he is to do the same again next season? Victor Lindelof started the FA Cup final instead of him. So, and Gareth Southgate's mentioned, hasn't he, about his England position, being in jeopardy if he doesn't get more minutes. So, they're big. I wonder if United have tried to sell better. James Garner, look at him last summer, where there was sort of a bit of disagreement, I suppose, from fans that wanted him to be given a chance. I mean, he's actually done okay, I think, last sort of month or so under Dyche at Everton. So maybe time will tell on that exact deal. But I mean, at least I feel like at least in that one they did. Ten Hag had decided he wasn't going to make it in his team. They got good money for him, sort of 10 million or so. I know there's add-ons and things, but I think that was fine. So United are conscious of getting better at selling players because they need to, just for funds, but also for competitive tension in the squad. To kind of keep these players on their toes, really.